we hear a lot about genetics, but in hematologic malignancy, we're not always hearing about epigenetics. But you happen to think this is a very important question. Why?
Well, first of all, if you look at the genetics of many of the myeloid diseases, there are actually mutations occurring very commonly in epigenetic enzymes and genes. For instance, DNMT3A, ASXL1, TET2. They're seen not only in disease, but even in what's referred to as clonal hematopoiesis of elderly and aging. And so these are very common mutations, and it suggests that the pathway, meaning aberrant epigenetics, is really critical in cancer.
Could you define epigenetic changes then? Because these are not the same things you get from your mum and dad.
Right. So I think there's two easy ways to think about this. One is the notion that every cell in your body has exactly the same DNA, but each cell in your body has its own function and its own identity. And so to maintain the cellular identity requires epigenetics. You could see the same principle applying to a cancer cell. So a cancer cell, every time it divides, must maintain its identity as a cancer cell. And so if you can interfere with the epigenetics of the process, you can get a cancer cell to behave like a normal cell and acquire normal functions.
So you can dress a wolf in sheep's clothing, basically.
Exactly. You can take a cell that had no function with a specific mutation, and then even though the mutation's still there, suddenly the cell can function as a neutrophil or as a red blood cell or a platelet.
And epigenetic functions partly come from the environment or the surrounding ambience.
Well, that's a very good point, which is when your cells respond to something in the environment, they don't change the DNA, right? The DNA is fixed. But in order for the cell to respond requires an epigenetic response. So even your diet, the role of inflammation, and aging, these all affect the epigenetics of the cell because they don't have a specific impact on the DNA.
Now, what could doctors potentially be doing to influence the epigenetics of their patients positively so that they don't get cancer or so they recover from their cancer?
Well, there's some interesting things about diet. Methionine,
Like?
So whether you should have methionine or less methionine, valine, less valine, more valine, and there are the sirtuins are a group of histone deacetylases, and they're involved in aging. It's one of the activating these enzymes is something that red wine does, resveratrol. And so there's a notion that some of the same things that may prevent aging may also prevent the mutations that occur in an epigenetic manner.
Now, there haven't been big studies done on this, double-blind, controlled, placebo-controlled studies, but what evidence is there that you would label as scientific about some of the epigenetic factors that could potentially be targeted in cancer?
Right. So there are now some drugs. The IDH mutants are targeted by an IDH inhibitor, EZH2 mutants targeted by an EZH2 inhibitor. And so there are a variety of enzymes that are very important in self-renewal or involved in the differentiation process of cancer cell, and those are at the top of our list for targeting with small molecules because these are enzymes, and so they are targetable.
Mm-hmm. And do they mix well with other treatments?
Well, one of the very exciting things is we learn how to boost the immune system so that it can better recognize the cancer cell, is that there are ways to make the cancer cell more recognizable to the immune system. One of those is checkpoint blockade, which those inhibitors basically remove the camouflage from the cancer cell and allow the immune system to see it. But epigenetics can also allow gene products to suddenly be expressed for the first time on a cancer cell. And those very gene products can be the target of immunotherapies. And so we're very excited about combining epigenetic therapies with immunotherapy.
Now, bearing in mind the fact that epigenetics is not something that most cancer doctors are thinking about every day, how would you summarize what doctors should take away about this topic from the perspective here at the American Society of Haematology meeting?
Okay, so the first principle would be cancer cannot simply be thought of as a genetic disease anymore. It's a genetic and an epigenetic disease. And the second thing is that these are targetable. We've been trying to get targets in the cell. And now that we have enzymes that are easily to target, the future, probably the next decade, we're going to see the introduction of a large number of drugs that can target epigenetics.